This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. I value clarity, honesty, and the willingness to play with difficult ideas. That's why I have nothing good to say about any politician. It's why I dislike most journalists. And it's why I'm deeply disappointed in most of my fellow academics. But it's also why I seek out very smart people who are not professional intellectuals. It's why I'll go way out of my way to talk to someone who works in a watch shop, who happens to read books, and who happens to be able to speak clearly and honestly and with great intellectual rigor about big ideas and his own life. This is my interview with James Sullivan. So as a lot of you know, about a year ago, I was besieged by thousands, hordes of people online, especially on Twitter, telling me that I was the stupidest person in the world and possibly homosexual for suggesting that gender and race are social constructs after my appearance on Joe Rogan. And I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages like that every single day. And I think it was many days into that. I can't remember exactly. You can correct me, James. But it had been happening, an onslaught, and I had sort of given up hope on humanity generally, and certainly on Twitter, and maybe on myself. And then out of the blue, some dude named James from Houston with a handful of followers, some person I shouldn't really pay attention to, puts out a series of tweets, I think it was, or at least I think it was more than one, that absolutely nailed what I was trying to say and said it better. And I said, who the hell is this guy? He really understands postmodernism. And so I DM'd you, and you were like, yeah, I work in a watch shop. And I said, what? You're the person I want to have on my podcast. And so I'm here in Houston for that reason, very much that reason. So glad to meet you in person. I have been an admirer of yours since then. And I've seen other work, and we've had some discussions online. And it became very clear to me that you not only have a very high level, sophisticated understanding of philosophy in particular, but that you have a special talent, I believe, for communicating, articulating very difficult philosophical concepts in ways that are accessible, and I think you say leisurely for the types of people who tend to listen to podcasts, and Joe Rogan in particular. So that's another reason I want you here, is that I want you to help me do this better, to articulate big ideas that are important, that are unknown to 99.999% of Americans. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Everyone should know James hasn't finished college. That's the first thing to know.
I have not.
Second thing to know is your last name is Sullivan. I haven't mentioned that, right?
That's right.
And you're not the boxer.
No, who?
Wasn't it James L. Sullivan was an important boxer in the early 20th century?
I don't know.
Oh my God, James. Okay. You're fine. You're a philosopher, not a historian. Yeah, no, seriously. And you're sort of a member of the mixed mental arts community.
Yeah, I'm a periphery member of the mixed mental arts.
Okay. And which is I told you before we turned the mics on that I think it's the smartest internet subculture I've come across.
They are certainly the most engaged and far-reaching.
Yeah,
as far as the kinds of different things that they are able to talk about and reach at.
Do you ever read Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci?
He's on the list.
So he had this concept of the working class intellectual, or the organic intellectual, he called it. And
yeah, he didn't like intellectual and like academic intellectuals.
Well,
right?
Yeah. So, his big theory is about hegemony, cultural hegemony. So that the ruling class, the capitalist class, establishes its hegemony, maintains its power by controlling culture.
Okay, right? That makes sense.
Yeah,
I follow so far.
Yeah, it's not good though. It's a shitty argument actually. But so his alternative, in other words, to create revolution, what had to happen was the working class had to create its own intellectuals, who would be communists. But to him,
for him,
yeah. So working class, or for him, a working class communist was somehow organic. But anyway, the point in part was that ordinary people with ordinary lives, ordinary jobs can and should become the major intellectuals of the day. And by doing so, that would bring about the revolution, or at least change the world dramatically. Now, I don't like the part where he insists that they be communists in order to be organic, right? But I do, and this is what this show is in part devoted to, as I think you know, giving a platform to people who are as smart or smarter than I think, and as important in their thinking as any academic out there, but who are totally unknown in this world. I just think that, and I really mean this, I mean, I know that you are smarter on a lot of these questions than most professors in this field. I know you're going to say no, but I've been around them, and it's just true. I mean, I don't say that casually. I mean, I don't invite just anybody on this show. Anyway, James, so you have your own podcast, and I will stop talking eventually.
Okay.
That's what you do, right? You do talk about philosophy and very difficult philosophical concepts.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. One of, I started the podcast to talk about just whatever I wanted to do. I just wanted to start a podcast. And then as I tried to focus in on what it was that I was good at, I eventually retreated back into philosophy. And what happened actually, I did a couple episodes on like machines and AI that my views on have since evolved. I did another one about Neil Gaiman. I'm very engaged in his work. I like him a lot. And then I was cleaning out my closet. I have this old chest in the very back of my closet. It's covered with clothes, but in it is all of my old schoolwork. I saved every essay that I wrote, every printout, and as I was cleaning out, I was looking for something, and I found a printed PDF of Derrida's On Forgiveness, and I'm standing in my closet. It's a very small closet. It barely holds me, and I'm standing in my closet and I'm reading it, and my fiance Adriana comes up and she goes, "What the fuck are you smiling at?" And I go, "Oh, reading this essay makes me really happy." And she goes, "What?" And so I said, "Well, you read it." And so I tried reading it to her, and she goes, "Stop." And I go, "Okay, well, I'll do an episode on it." And so one of my first really hard episodes was tackling Derrida's On Forgiveness.
It's one of the most difficult things to understand that's ever been written.
That's one of his easiest essays.
Yeah, I know. The guy's impossible. And I claim to be a postmodernist and a fan of his. I am not at all sure what he has said. I mostly, and I've said this publicly, I'll admit it, I've mostly gone on what scholars of Derrida have said about him, their interpretations. I sort of used their interpretations, then read his text and just sort of hoped that they were right.
I'm gonna try and map.
Because I don't actually, I can't say at all. I don't see much correspondence actually necessarily between those interpretations and what I see in the text. He's the hardest.
Derrida takes me about 30 minutes to get his rhythm down, because his writing is weird. That's all it really is.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's monologuing his stream of consciousness, and then maybe he edits it. But there's also the translation from French to English that makes it difficult. Right. So reading English scholars of Derrida is easier, like John Caputo, who speaks in English, and the way that he's able to translate it makes it much easier to digest.
Okay. So you did what, 2 years in college?
I spent 4 years in college.
Oh, okay. We didn't graduate.
Yeah.
But you were at a very esteemed philosophy department as an undergraduate, which was the University of North Texas. Right?
I went to 2 different schools.
Okay.
I didn't tell you this. This was a surprise.
Hmm.
I started at Sam Houston State University.
Nice.
It is not known for its philosophy department
or much else.
In 2005 and 2006, they didn't have a philosophy department. They had an office in the psychology department, and the department head was just the oldest guy there. He's a logician, a trained logician, and the hardest motherfucker that I've ever taken a class from.
Oh, wow.
I took 2 logic courses with him. I got a C in both, and they were hugely beneficial.
I doubt I would have passed that course.
The second test, I got the second highest grade, and it was like the formal logic, where you can take the big argument that you understood and you condense it into the syntax, all the symbols, and you do math. I fucking hate math. And I got a 32. And instead of the professor coming in and saying, okay, we're going to revisit this, he just moved on to the next lesson. Because if you didn't get it, it's because you weren't being logical. Oh my God. And so it's your own fault. Anyway, so I left there and I went to University of North Texas, which is a tremendous school.
It really does have a good reputation as not just being sort of academically rigorous, but being sort of cutting edge.
Yeah, they
intellectually. Yeah,
very fantastic school.
Yeah.
And when I got there, I was also at Sam Houston. I took 5 courses in philosophy, and I didn't meet a single other philosophy major. I was one of 5, but I don't know where the other 4 were. Once I transferred over to University of North Texas, that's where I really got exposed to the community of like a community of peers, where I could talk philosophy, be challenged on my essays. Most of the people in my classes were taking these classes because they thought they were easy, and then they were dropping them because they weren't. But I didn't finish. I got to my 4th year, and a bunch of shit ended up happening. I had a son. I had to work. So I left, and I moved back over here to Houston, and I've been working ever since.
You had a son when you were in college?
Yeah.
Why?
I didn't mean to.
Was it just that kind of thing?
Yeah. It's complicated, but yeah. He's great. He's 8 years old now.
With a different woman than Adriana? Okay.
That is correct.
So you had to leave because of that. I
had to make money.
You were close to finishing, right?
I was very close. I have 21 credits left.
And how are you doing in your classes at UNT?
Well, there's a very big difference between going to college and being enrolled in college. And for the last year, I was enrolled in college, but I was not going. So I failed all the last 2 semesters, pretty much.
Right. But the courses you actually
But the courses that I took, I was doing well.
You must have done well,
yes.
Right? Yeah. You must have been kind of a star student, in fact.
Maybe.
Well, we'll see. We'll test you right now. We'll see how good you are, buddy. Yeah, no, I would love to do that, actually, because it's funny. I want to learn Derrida better, and I want to be able to articulate the ideas better and be more sure of my interpretations also. And this is the truth. I mean, I could, and I probably will, go talk to a philosophy professor at some point on this podcast to do that. But I kind of wanted to start with you for a couple of reasons. One is that I know, because I've seen you do it, you are very, very good at this, communicating really tough ideas. Just like on Twitter that day, that was phenomenal what you did. You kind of summarized Foucault's work and a lot of other people's work in postmodernism in a way that was better than I had done. I mean, and
thank you.
It was really exemplary. I mean, and that's why I DM'd you, and that's why you're here today. So I hope that you continue to do that. But let's get into that in a minute and start to talk actually about how we should think as normal civilians, about people like Derrida and Foucault and Nietzsche, et cetera. We'll do that in a minute. But where do you come from? You're in Texas. You're not supposed to be reading philosophy.
Well, I've been here.
They don't do that down here.
They don't do that down here. I don't have a large community of peers here. That's true. if you read and study philosophy in Texas, it's because you're at a university.
Right.
So I'm definitely the only person at work, and pretty much anywhere that I've worked, I tell people, oh, I study philosophy.
Right. You have a regular, would you say 50-hour a week job?
Yeah, I work 50 hours a week.
Which is you pick up jewelry to be repaired?
I'm a repair manager at a jewelry store. So I go and I do absolutely everything that has to be done. So I also polish jewelry. I do casting. I casted my fiance's ring. I did everything but set the stones because I didn't want to break them, and they're expensive, and I had to pay for them. Yeah. I had my friend set the stones, but I generated the wax. I cast the wax into metal. These are techniques that are hundreds of years old. Huh. Almost nothing has changed in the jewelry industry in 200 years, with the exception of we have better torches, and 3D printing now does most waxes. But it used to be hand carved, and a lot of them still are. So while the front end of jewelry is very flashy and bougie, the back end is very dirty. Everybody there is a trade worker, and they work with their hands all day. They burn and callus, and they make art. They really do. They make art back there.
How did you get into that?
I needed a job, and my friend happened to work at Jared's, the Galleria of Jewelry.
Indeed.
And he was going to Burning Man for 2 weeks and needed someone to fill in for him. So I went over there, and then a neighboring competitor jewelry store where I work now is a mom and pop jewelry store. Well, it's pop, but I was looking for better work because Jared's wasn't paying me what I needed. I needed something a little bit better. And one of my other friends had just gone over there and started working in their repair shop. And he said, hey, we need somebody. And he sent me a picture of him drinking a beer at work. And I said, that's where I need to be. I should go over there. So I went over there. I've been there for almost 6 years.
And how old were you when you started this, when you left school and started working?
About 25.
25. So yeah. 25 years old, you're working at a jewelry shop as a repair person.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have a college degree, but you have a son. Did you still have the girlfriend or wife?
No.
So she was gone.
Yeah.
Are you raising the son by yourself?
No, she raises him.
Okay.
But we're not together.
But you were paying for that in part?
Yeah.
Okay. Did he ever live with you at all?
No. I spent the summers with him.
Where does he live?
Right now he lives in Austin.
Okay.
And she's trying to move him to Arizona.
Okay. So you had to make money not only to support yourself, but also in part to support him.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of pressure for a 25-year-old.
That was the main source of just general economic anxiety for about 3 years.
Yeah. And is that when the drinking started?
Yeah.
I speak with no I can't relate to that at all.
Natural progression, yeah.
Yeah, no, I drank like I was drinking like a medium-sized fish before my divorce.
A much bigger fish.
But a giant whale after the divorce, when I was, even more responsible for everything.
Yeah.
With my son and my life. Yeah. So philosophy, I would imagine, took kind of a back seat during those years.
Yeah, I didn't have I went through an I hate philosophy kind of thing.
We all have.
And
welcome to America.
Yeah. But it wasn't until I started getting kind of my life put back together in ways that I liked it.
How did you do that?
One was quit drinking because I was drinking a lot.
Okay. Why did you quit drinking?
My wife made me. My soon-to-be wife.
Oh, so you met Adriana.
I met Adriana during the drinking.
Gotcha.
And she pretty much dragged me out of it. And that was a big help. Now, you'll like this about her. She is absolutely my polar opposite. She is a conservative, Christian, regular fucking person that just happens to have a gigantic heart And that's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's all she needs.
Wow.
So she's been absolutely a huge cure for kind of all of the that like intellectual depression that people seem to get sucked into.
Indeed.
She doesn't suffer from that.
Yeah.
So she's just like, oh, well, that's no problem because we have each other, and then we'll figure it out. And then she'll tell me, stop worrying about things, or stop worrying about something that doesn't matter. And I go, oh yeah. And then I can couch something that I would usually drag on and think about for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing to have someone like that with you, right?
She's a good buffer.
You might go down, but you're going to go down together.
Yeah.
At least, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's that's a major comfort. It has been for me.
Yes.
And you're getting married soon.
We are. We're getting married in September. I'm very excited.
I don't formally approve of that.
That's fine.
Except in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sounds really good.
She really wanted to get married, and I really wanted to make her happy.
Yeah. I do relate to that. I do understand that very much. Yeah.
I had to make her happy. I have all kinds of individual objections to marriage, about it as an institution, it as the history of marriage, and there's all this baggage but I'm the only one that's holding on to that. She doesn't give a shit about any of that.
Yeah.
She just wants to be married and wants to have a big celebration of our love, and that's all it is for her.
So let me ask you this: how is she about your big intellectual, analytical brain?
It drives her crazy.
Chewing up the world constantly.
It drives her crazy.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Why?
Because we're able to, I have someone to pit it up against that isn't going to just battle back. And I don't get stuck in some kind of like semantics. I never get caught in semantics.
So she does talk to you about this stuff. You can't talk to her about it.
Yeah.
She's interested.
No, she's not interested. But if we get into, I've lost absolutely every single argument because I try and fight our arguments on an intellectual field when they're an emotional battle. We're arguing over emotions.
Yeah, right.
We're not arguing over semantics or intellect. We're arguing over emotions,
ego and emotions.
And how I made you feel,
and standing, and
yes,
yeah, right. Huh.
So
and power
and power
in the relationship. Yeah.
And so that dynamic has actually been really helpful in resituating how I think about philosophy also.
So is it the case that you are her superior in formal intellectual terms?
Yes.
But that she holds all the power in the relationship?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't relate to that at all. I like Adriana though. I like the sound of her. I do. Hiring is challenging, but there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/Russell. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. With results like that, it's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is the highest rated hiring site in America. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Russell. That's ZipRecruiter.com/RUSSELL. ZipRecruiter.com/Russell. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Well, okay, so and so you stopped drinking and then you found Adriana, stopped drinking and then got back into philosophy despite her total lack of interest in that.
Yeah, it was my, I needed something to occupy. I'd been talking about doing a podcast for over a year, and she would hound me about it. She goes, you keep talking about it. When are you ever just buy the equipment. It costs like $100.
Oh, see, that's awesome. I mean, so that
she's like, just do it.
She's not interested in what you're talking about, but she wants you to
She wants me to do it, and she wants me to be happy.
That's fantastic.
I was nervous about coming here.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why?
Because.
What?
I don't know. So I was nervous because I was like, well, there's no way that Thaddeus came all the way to see me. That didn't make any sense. Because
well, to be honest, you're not the only reason I came here, but yes, you're one of the.
No, I'm the only one now.
You are. No,
now we get to play with my ego. Earlier we didn't. So
I told you before we turned the mics on that you mentioned a very famous philosopher who happens to live in Houston.
Yes.
Who we don't have to name, but and you said I assumed you were coming to interview him, and I said
that made the most sense.
And I told you the truth, which was that yes, he was on the list, and I did think very seriously about inviting him on the podcast. But I actually, and this is God's honest truth, when I knew I was coming through Houston, I decided I would have James on instead of him.
Yeah,
and not because I'm afraid of him. We actually don't even disagree that much. I really was honestly, I really want to talk to people like you because I actually think you can, as I said, you can articulate what these ideas mean and also how we live with ideas like that, or what it means to live with ideas like that.
Yeah. Well, I think my hang up was just that old enemy of imposter syndrome that just looms over me all the time. So because I don't have the degree, even though I don't need the degree,
you're free of it, right?
I am. I'm absolutely free. The thing about what I love about my podcast and what I love about studying philosophy on my own terms is that I don't have homework. I already have a job that I work. So I don't want philosophy to be another job that I have to do.
Right.
I don't like people telling me what to read or assign. It's the assigning that I don't like. I would go to an ethics class and we'd be reading 6 books. I can't read 6 books. I'm busy. So I'll read an essay, but I do it on my terms. And that's what I like about what I do now, is that philosophy is now fun again. It's not a task. It's not a job. And I'm able to tackle it in a way that, in a freedom that I'm able to understand and then use.
Yeah. You think you can succeed in making philosophy fun for Americans?
I hope so. I think it's fun.
I'm not sure. Not because of you and your abilities, but because of Americans and they're really good at avoiding hard ideas.
I think, I don't know. I see one of the ways that lately I've been working on philosophy in fiction. So right now I'm working on a series on Ursula K. Le Guin's books, the Earthsea novels.
The science fiction writer?
Yeah. Now, the Earthsea novels, I think they started in the 60s around, when was the Tolkien books written? Around that time, right?
You're asking the wrongest guy on this one. Yeah.
The books are all about wizards and dragons and magic. And on their own, they're fun. They're kids' books. You can read them as early as 10. I found them hugely engaging at 30. They're fantastic books. They're fun. They're emotional. I cried, and every single audiobook had one spot where I choked up.
In the Lord of the Rings?
No.
Trilogy?
Those books.
What are you talking about?
Earthsea.
Oh, you're talking about Le Guin?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. I don't know her work at all.
The Earthsea novels are all about wizards, dragons, magic, but it's also about language. It's about power dynamics. Through the arc, there's 6 books. Through the arc of the books, we see there's a male-dominated wizard community that they're the wise men. And they're on this one island. And then over the arc of the books, we see how that dynamic is very Foucauldian. It's established in recent history. So women aren't allowed in. And why aren't women allowed in? And they say, oh, well, women have never been allowed into the island of Roke. This is the wise man's island. Women are just witches. And they place them down, and they call it women's work, witches' work. Wicked is women's magic. All this language is very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of the books, you see that earlier in the history, women helped establish that island, and slowly the patriarchy falls towards the end of the book. And
how does it fall? Why does it fall?
A female enters, who's not supposed to be there, and the like council of wise men argue over the rules and whether or not these rules need to change, or if they've always been in place, and how sacred are these rules.
Because of her intervention?
Because of her intervention.
And what is her intervention besides just being a woman who's speaking up?
It's not just, she holds, shit, what was it? Why did she go there? She wanted to learn magic, and so she went, but, she was also a dragon.
Well, that helps.
That helps.
When you're intervening.
So it also plays into this, this myth building of, what do we do with forgotten knowledge? And what do we do when it resurfaces? And how do we encounter it? Do we push it away, or do we incorporate it? And yeah.
What's the forgotten knowledge in this case?
That there used to be there was a race of dragons, and then they split over some disagreement. And so half of them went on to the east, and the other half went to the west. And the ones that went to the east became humans, and they had dragon speech, which is how the magic is formed. They used dragon language. And so everything has a true word, right, where its essence is captured.
Right.
And that's where all this philosophy of language builds in.
Okay.
And so if you know somebody's true name, you're able to control their essence. And it's very...
there it is. Okay. Yeah.
But you can do it with all objects. All objects have their own true name. And I talk about this in the...
Oh, wow.
In the first book, and this is where I start talking about Derrida. It's a necessary deconstruction, because she explains in one of the books when talking about the true name of the sea, and she says, no one can know the true name of the whole sea, because if you say like the Baltic Sea, and you learn the true name of the Baltic Sea, but that Baltic Sea is made up of what? All these different rivers and currents, and those also have their own true name.
All changing constantly.
All changing, but they all have their own name, and they all are in reference to another.
Yeah.
And that's
Derrida. That's Derrida.
That's Derrida.
I think.
Yes. That's you cannot escape the text. It doesn't mean text, literal text. It means reference.
Yeah.
We're talking about you cannot escape reference. You're always in reference to something or someone. Always.
All within the same network.
Yeah.
Right? Everything refers to everything, something else. It's in a closed, am I right? But is this how you read Derrida? All signs or words or meanings are within a closed but ever expanding or changeable network?
Let's, if you imagine like an infinite circle, everything has a context. And so, but Derrida was also very concerned with what he called the wholly other, like WHOLLY, which is the thing that is outside of all of it, the infinite, what Levinas called the infinite. What is ever the one thing that is outside that can't be placed. And that's what he was really concerned with ethically. That's what he was really concerned with politically. How do we grasp at basically the impossible? And what do we do with the impossible? How do we think about the impossible? Because we know everything that's possible, but that's mundane and maybe not mundane.
Did he believe in the wholly other outside of? He didn't believe in a wholly other being outside the text. That's the whole point of his philosophy, right? Did he?
I think he did. Yeah.
I thought he famously said, nothing is outside the text.
Right.
So where's the wholly other?
It's the one thing that's what's wholly other.
Oh, that's the exception.
That's the exception
to Derrida's own rule.
But it's impossible to grasp. But that's the one thing that we should grasp.
I did not know this at all about Derrida. That he
that's
had this
the one thing
weird exception.
That's the one thing.
And
that
it sounds just mystical.
Yeah, it is.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Shock?
That's what you reach for. And so if you look at his essay on forgiveness,
that's one to him. It's the thing that one should reach for, or that people have tended to reach for. In other words, go ahead.
So if you look at his essay on forgiveness, he talks a lot about what forgiveness isn't. Forgiveness isn't transactional. It's not like a relationship of, I forgive you because you said you're sorry. I should either forgive you unconditionally, like an unconditional love, an unconditional forgiveness. And so the only thing that is worth forgiving is the unforgivable. But then once you forgive that, it becomes forgivable, and it's an ever expanding, but ever reaching kind of like an ethical impossibility that we always should reach for.
Okay, now my reading of Derrida is now sounding more like this. Okay, I think maybe when I said the way I read deconstructionism again is that that everything is language, everything is text. There's words and meanings and symbols and signifiers and all that, but each one references another one, and there is no original or base term or signifier, right?
Right.
Everything is just it just is endless,
right?
Circulating like an ocean. It's a great analogy or metaphor. But it is always changing and has certainly in the history of languages expanded. Certainly with English it has, right? It's always getting bigger. We add words to it all the time, right?
Right.
But I read him as claiming that there's nothing outside the text, that's it. But now it makes sense to me why it expands. Maybe he's trying to explain why it expands. Right. Because he's making a historical claim, isn't he here?
Yeah. I think postmodernism always starts at a historical claim.
Sure. I mean, to me, it's genius, right? Is that it's always genealogical. Like whatever is happening, whatever phenomenon you're trying to explain, just look at the history of it.
Yeah.
Just find the origins of it and you will find an origin somewhere. So I'm thinking about scientists who I've been listening to lately, and I know nothing about science really, but
I'm also not ignorant, but not engaged very much.
Yeah. So, and I'm only interested in the philosophy and history of science, right? Which is important.
Same.
Sure. So I've listened. So the smartest scientists I've listened to recently, I think this was Lawrence Krauss, actually. I think it was on Sam Harris's podcast, actually. Yeah, it was. I love this. He said, he's going on about how, science it doesn't ever prove truth. Real scientists don't even believe that we can prove it because all we're ever doing is disproving things.
I had a biologist that was a friend of mine when I was much younger, like 18, 19.
Well, this is really good. Keep going. Yeah.
And I was like first and second year philosophy student, the worst kind of philosophy student.
What's that?
It's the kind that I read an essay and then that's what I believe immediately. Oh, yeah. And then the next week we read the next essay.
That's called being an adolescent.
Yeah. And so I'd jump on these forums and we'd hash it out back and forth and we'd talk science and philosophy. And one of the best things that he ever said was exactly, science doesn't prove anything. Its function is to disprove.
Right. So here's the thing that Lawrence Krauss dealt with. I love this about him. He was so honest. He made all these fabulous arguments that basically all the postmodernists, including Derrida and Foucault, have said about science, which is that, there is no truth, no objective reality, or at least he was saying, he doesn't make that claim, but he does say, we've never found it.
Right.
And all we do is disprove. We never prove anything. Right. So, and he understood that argument that he was making would lead one to the conclusion that there is no truth,
no objective truth.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so he acknowledged that, which I loved about him. And then here's the thing, and here's where life meets ideas, right? The question then becomes, right, James?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you get out of bed in the morning as a scientist? And I think that's what we're talking about here. What Derrida's holy, and it's
The
and
holy
what a
other.
fabulous choice of word the translator made there. Holy, WHOLLY, but it could also very much be HOLY.
I don't speak French, but it's Tautre, Tautre.
So this may not be the double entendre that Derrida was intending, right? But with the English translation, I love it because it's holy, whole, outside, and holy because it's we haven't seen it, just like we haven't seen God, right? We haven't proved God's existence. And Lawrence Krauss said, right? He said, the reason I get out of bed in the morning is simply faith. Faith that there is truth out there. We've never found it, but that's what keeps me doing science. That's which has kept over hundreds and hundreds of years expanding science, language, what we call knowledge, right? Discourse, what's in our heads keeps expanding because I guess, is this what Derrida was saying? The search for
this holy other. It's the thing that we always reach for. We reach for the impossible, and that's how everything moves forward, but outward. Yeah.
Yeah, just outward. That's exactly right. Not forward. Outward. Yeah. Exactly. It just gets bigger. And it's amorphous.
Because it can be, it can be directionless,
right? Yeah. Right. Because if you look at take English, right? English language, and you were to write every single word.
I used to be really into etymology.
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Which is it's fun to like discover the origin of a word, and then maybe that origin also elucidates something extra. I had an ancient philosophy professor that was really big on that. He'd go, "Oh, you use the word idiot. Funny thing about that word." And he'd say, the origin means that a person that was an idiot could only do one thing, idio. Like they were only good at one thing, and that was it. And he goes, "So are you saying that this person is only good at one thing?" You go, "No." And they'd have to change their language or backtrack their comment.
Yeah. It's like, just if anybody doubts the wisdom, I think, of Derrida here, it's just ask them to define whatever word they just used to denounce Derrida or postmodernism, right? What language, deluded, stupid, crazy, whatever it is they use, and say, what does that word mean? And then they will use another word or set of words
in reference and context.
To define that word. And then you'll say, oh yeah, what do those words mean? And then they'll use another set of words, and they keep going. That was Derrida's whole argument, right? That's deconstructionism, essentially. Structuralism.
The most,
and there is no end. There's no final word that tells you the exact true meaning of the first word you used.
The most apt criticism of Derrida was that his deconstruction can also itself be deconstructed. And when somebody told that to him, he goes, "Yeah,
no kidding."
And he goes, "That's the game."
Exactly, that's the game. And game was what the word he used a lot, right? He writes about playing games. He says that's what I'm doing, and that's what maybe we should be doing, is just play games. I love that too.
He talks about he talks about, and this is part of my influence too, is that philosophy is at play. It's always we're at play with ideas, both in a historical context and in an intellectual context. And we take them and we put them in a practical context, but we're playing with these ideas and we're seeing where they fit and where they don't. And then if the rules don't fit, or if we can't change the rules, we discard it. But it's supposed to be something that we toy with, like children almost.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's maybe how I define true intellectualism. Maybe, it's
if you're not having fun, fucking do something else.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not just the fun is part of it, but it's the willingness to be absolutely irreverent to all ideas and concepts, to play, right? It's like comedians, stand-up comedians. That's what they do.
Yeah,
everything is fair game You can play with anything. You can turn any idea upside down, sideways, back, and it's fine. We're okay. Let's just play for a while we're doing this. I think so. Maybe you can convince Americans that philosophy is fun.
If I could be funnier, it'd be easier.
Well, right now, suddenly I had all these images of like you producing YouTube videos, right?
Yeah.
I think that's maybe
there is
maybe that is your future.
There's a guy that does, there's a couple people.
A lot of people do this.
That do this. Philosophy Tube on YouTube. I'm warning you because you won't like him. He's a Marxist.
Yeah.
But he also really engages in postmodern thought. He's also a teacher. So he does, he's English. So he does like A-level, B-level courses. And he's like, this is great material if you're taking what here would be like a 100 course, like an introductory to Kant. And he'll do Kant, and he's also an actor. So he stages stuff. He does really good production value, and they're like 10 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
They're great works.
Yeah. But I don't know. Think about it. This might because he's a Marxist, you're not. So, I mean, there's a niche there. You can fill. But it could be big because there's also, there's a philosophy. Is it a podcast that's big? What's the big philosophy podcast?
There's Partially Examined Life.
Yes.
Which is rigorous and academic.
There's another one though, but there's one that gets like a significant audience, like in the tens of thousands or something. I don't know.
And then, I know I think there's 3 big ones, and then one of them is the guy here.
Yeah, we can name him. It's fine.
Very Bad Wizards.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Tamler Summers, Very Bad Wizards is one.
Partially Examined Life. I can't think of the other one.
Okay, but yeah, there are a few, and so it's happening, and clearly there's actually a market for it. Was my point, is that there's enough people who do this.
I have when I check my numbers,
it's amazing.
I look at it, and I don't get a lot, but when I look at it, and then I go, okay, I know that was my friend Zach, and that was me downloading it on my phone,
right?
And I know my professor, one of he was going to be my mentor. He's a real postmodern entity. He's fantastic. He is a former Buddhist, a narco-Christian. When I met him and he was teaching our postmodernism class, he was technically a student. He's just now graduating, like this year.
Zen Buddhism, postmodernism,
lots of threads.
Close siblings, are they not?
Yeah, and that's
I have found.
That has I think that has a lot to do with the history of Western philosophy being very exclusive and being very academic, university focused, not engaged with other systems of thought, like even what we call Western philosophy. I don't know where you draw the line between East and West.
I was going to say, maybe you can help me with this. I mean, so I knew zero about Eastern thought, Eastern philosophy, and now I know like 0.001%.
Yeah, same.
And only because of mindful meditation, which I've done a little bit of in the last few years, right? And I've heard like Andy Puddingham, who's the head of Headspace, talk about stuff.
Right.
I know a little bit, enough that it's like, oh, damn, you sound a lot like Foucault and Derrida. In several ways, right? So they're not interested in making truth claims. They're not interested in reifying the past or the future. They're interested in living in right now.
Present. Yep.
The present. And also they're anti-moralistic. That's the thing I love the most about them.
Pretty anti-materialist.
Yeah, I don't love that about them. And I wouldn't say the postmodernists were anti-materialists, but they wouldn't ever... They just said,
but in contrast with Western thought.
So do you do that stuff? Do you do mindful meditation?
I did. I dabbled in Taoism when I was like 16, mostly as an act of rebellion, because my parents were, they're Irish Catholic, but barely. It was just, I was 16 and I picked up a book on it, and then it was like a daily meditation kind of thing. So you read a passage, and then I would sit in my room with my arms crossed and try and meditate. And I've always found meditation to be incredibly useful. I never really let that go. I'm not good at practicing it. But when I do, it's always very good. And there's different things that can be meditative. And I think that's what Western religions really hinge on when they do. If you think of prayer as a meditative process, if you think of prayer as, can I ask you a question and then you give me, or can I have this thing and then you don't get it? That's not a meditative prayer process.
Yeah.
But if you think of prayer or communion as a meditative process, then you can get the same kind of effect.
Yeah. So I've been on an anti-intellectual kick lately.
Cool.
So yeah. So it started off by noticing that all the wars basically in modern history were thought up by intellectuals.
Yeah.
Certainly in this country, and I think in most countries. But now I'm thinking also that's the difference here between Eastern and Western thought in this way, right? Western thought valorizes or privileges, to use another academic term, intellectualism, to take things from the past and the future and the present and then abstract them, make them into ideas, and then mull over, twist, turn, craft the things out, the abstractions that are above us and outside of us and just only in our minds. And then we end up living right in our minds in this sort of sea of ideas. This is me talking about myself. But then I get called, I am actually accorded sort of higher status for doing that. That's considered to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. But as you mentioned earlier, it actually ends up making us, maybe that was before we turned on the mics, depressed and unhappy and miserable.
Very, very common for intellectuals to be really depressed and alienated and isolated.
And so what we do as intellectuals is we spend pretty much all of our life in the past, in the future, and
in a book,
and above,
or in our heads,
and above the present.
Yeah, not
above
engaged.
The present, never right here at this table with James in that chair.
It took my fiance Adriana about a year and a half before she figured out what I was doing when I was absolutely spaced out. And she would go, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, nothing. I was just in my head for like 10 minutes. And she goes, "About what?" I go, "Literally, I don't know." I was just thinking about something and I was staring at that TV the whole time. But it's bad when we're trying to have a conversation and she'll say a word and that word will like trigger in a whole discussion in my head that I can't re-articulate back at her.
Right.
Or since I'm like mulling over a word because the word has it has like historical context that she doesn't understand. And if I just explain it to her, then I'll win this argument or whatever. And she's like, no, what the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Right.
But the Eastern religions also all, at least to my knowledge, their prophets are all paupers. They relish in the everyman. And I've been an everyman for about a decade now. And it's okay. It's fine. Most of the people that I work with, despite what intellectuals will claim in universities, they're just regular, normal, okay people. Conservatives, yes, and not intellectually rigorous, but they're good people.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were talking about intellectuals being good people and normal people. No, they're not.
Well, I've met some okay ones. I've met some very good people, but
no, I know, of course.
But they're not. I don't want to say they're not doing anything, but I worry about a domain that services only academia, and this is something that philosophy has been stuck in for forever. This has been the decline of philosophy.
Another thing I need you to explain to me,
okay,
honestly, and I have asked many philosophy professionals to explain this to me, and I've never gotten a good answer from them. This thing that dominates American philosophy departments called analytic philosophy, right? Which is opposed to
Continental
what's
philosophy.
called continental philosophy, which all I know is I like the continental philosophy.
I do too.
And they think it's a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
Fine. But then they talk about analytic philosophy, and I sort of have an idea of what it is, but I've never really studied it, and I don't really know what the hell they do. But by the way, if people don't know, that is like what 98% of philosophy professors in this country. That's what they do, right?
Yeah,
it's
I think
overwhelmingly dominant.
I was trained by continental philosophers.
Right. That's why I'm talking to you.
Analytic philosophers, I don't know what they do because their work doesn't seem valuable.
And of course, they think it's the only worthwhile philosophy. They are really dismissive of, essentially, isn't it? Like, isn't it the history of Western philosophy, right? The canon, the great books.
I really think of analytic philosophers as just scientists, the kind of scientists that believe in objective truth.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what analytic philosophers focus on, is the validity and rigidity of science and the in my opinion, overvaluation of science as a method for truth finding.
Okay, but they are objectivists, right? They believe in That's the presupposition,
right?
That there is a truth out there, and we can find it not through science apparently, but through philosophy. That's their
either through science or philosophy. There's probably different camps of that. I'm not sure.
And so, how on earth did they do this?
I don't know.
I don't either, and I've asked them many times. And they can never explain it to me.
I haven't read them, so I wouldn't be able to say.
But they have said things to me like, "Yeah, my dissertation, it's on 10 pages of Wittgenstein."
Oh yeah, so there's two Wittgensteins. There's early and late,
who is possibly the most impenetrable of all the philosophers, which is saying something.
I really like him.
Do you? Of course you do. You like Heidegger too, and Derrida. Derrida's got to be one of the hardest.
I like.
That's incredible to me. That you read that shit for fun. That is mind-boggling.
I like language games.
Okay.
I really like philosophy of language.
Okay.
And Wittgenstein is very important in that field.
Cool.
But there's two. I don't know which one is which. But apparently early Wittgenstein and late Wittgenstein completely disagree with one another. But I haven't read enough of him to really suss out why or what. But the little bit that I have read was cool.
Well, it's funny. That's how narcissistic we are. You know, that's what we do too. All of us in this game do. We argue with ourselves.
Yeah.
We may not like publish the results of that argument, but that's what we do.
Right.
Yeah. So we so we valorize intellect, abstractions in Western culture, and
I can show you a very good example, a very topical example of this.
Mm-hmm.
First, let me explain the history of philosophy has slowly been, and it's been a problem. I know they were confronting the problem when I was in university about interdisciplinarity, because philosophers, and I think science has this problem too, but science has like Neil deGrasse Tyson and other people, where philosophers are writing philosophy professors or papers for other philosophers to read and other philosophers to critique, and it stays within the circle, and that circle is ever narrowing, which is why I spent 4 years defending the very pursuit of my degree to people who said, "Why are you studying philosophy? What are you going to do with a philosophy degree?" And the only answer I had was teach, or I think the other half become lawyers.
Right.
Because it's a good
James.
Good preface for.
I would have been the most killer prosecutor.
Yeah, same.
If I had become a prosecutor, everybody would be incarcerated now. Yeah. We wouldn't have mass incarceration.
You could be a defense
total
lawyer
incarceration.
if you wanted to actually be a prison abolitionist.
I mean, seriously, I'm sure you
could be a defense lawyer and make sure that nobody goes to jail.
Yeah, right. Oh, I know. Yeah, either nobody would be in prison or everybody. No, I would be the greatest.
I have family
killer litigator on the other side.
I have family that are very successful lawyers,
but I chose not to. I spent 2 years deciding whether to go into academic program in history, or to law school. And I think I made the right choice.
I think you did okay.
But I don't know. Well, I did okay, but
Are you happy?
Well, really,
Would you have been happy
you
as
of all
a
people are
lawyer?
going to ask me that question? What do you mean by happy? I would have made a lot more money as a lawyer, but I don't know if I'd be happier. I know
Right.
a whole bunch of I know a whole bunch of very miserable lawyers who make
Yeah.
a lot of money and work all the time.
My aunt is a very successful. She
Mhm.
was the first woman to speak in front of the Supreme Court,
Oh yeah.
and she has loads of money. Also happens to be very happy.
That's unusual for that kind of person.
She, well, I think
Is she retired? Maybe that's why she's
no.
happy.
She started her own firm, so she.
Huh.
And I also think it depends on the kind of law that you go into.
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't think she's a prosecutor.
Yeah.
She does environmental law
Yeah.
and teaches about the death penalty.
Huh. Yeah. No. Okay. So sure, that can be interesting.
Yeah.
It doesn't pay as well. That's the thing.
She does okay.
I mean, it pays well, but not as well. But I don't know if I cut you off, but in a point you were making, but where I was going was, I think I can trace this problem and this difference between Eastern and Western to the mind-body dualism within Western thought, all the way back to the beginning.
worst thing that ever happened to philosophy.
I do believe that is, to me, it's the root of all the problems.
If I could go back in time, I would strangle Descartes before he ever wrote
started
anything.
way before him. He just like perfected it. But my friend Daniele Bolelli, who I think you know about,
he's fantastic.
Well, so you should maybe read his, believe it or not, his book on martial arts, which is a fantastic book on the warrior's path. And of all places, this is where I discovered this. I read that book like 5 or 6 years ago, and I called him. I was like, Daniele, man, I didn't know at all that that's not a thing in Eastern philosophy.
Yeah.
He says it right in there. And that's why martial arts kind of what it is, right? It's of the moment, it's of the body, and there's no split between mind and body when you're doing it. It's all merged. And it's just, there's no concept.
You're a single organism.
Of two different things, right? And so not only did we split the two, which of course both are inventions in Western thought, right? The mind and the body.
Right.
We invented them, right? But also we privileged the mind over the body. We established a hierarchy. So what is of the mind, which really means rationality and reason and discipline and
which are also loaded.
And order. Yeah. So that's why we live in our heads. And that's why we think only of the past and the future and ideas above the present, never the present itself. So Eastern philosophy doesn't do that, apparently. And that's why Zen Buddhism, I guess, comes out of there, which is all about living in the present and trying to move away from the thoughts that take us away from the present. Right. To me, that's how I've been taught it. It's like think of those thoughts as clouds in the sky. Yeah. Right. And just let them go instead of chasing them. Right. If you chase the cloud, the thought or idea, you chase the cloud, right? You end up just floating away, away from you, away from now, and away from the person who's sitting across from you. Right. And away from your body. Yeah. And we have found, you and I and a lot of other people who do that, it tends to make us less happy. Not only less happy, it affects the way that we can act politically. It affects the way that we can act just interpersonally. It's very difficult for there's jokes in philosophy departments about there's a difference between theory and praxis, and you either do one or the other. You can, no philosopher is an activist. I've literally told that. It was a joke, but that's what they were saying is if you're a philosopher, then you sit in this classroom and you do philosophy, and the activists, bless them, they're doing good work too. And we're going to think about it. Right. And so it's conservative politically in that way. Yeah. It stops you from acting. Yeah. Yeah. They like to study radical behavior, and they like to think about revolutions, and they like to talk about what a revolution would look like. But I know activists, and the way that they talk and think about ideas is
if you believe that, why aren't you doing anything right now?
Mm-hmm.
If you were an ally, or if you really believed in these ideas, then what are you doing? Why aren't you acting? Why are you? We have the ideas down. We don't need to think about them anymore. We need to act.
Right. Yeah, it has all sorts of negative influences, which I've talked about at great length. But I think the one thing to me that's the worst part of it is that it causes us in this game, this business, to be abstracted from our own feelings.
Yeah. Adriana is definitely my emotional intelligence buffer.
Yeah.
And that's because she's not bogged down with the not regular intelligence. That's a look, but with the cloud intellect.
Mm-hmm.
She's not stuck in that.
Right.
And she's very in tune with, she can look at me and tell that I'm in a bad mood, and I can absolutely be trying to hide it.
Yeah.
And I don't have that. Well, I'm learning, but I don't have that same.
Same what?
Skill set.
Yeah. I was wondering if you're going to say ability, because I do think
skill set.
I think you do have the ability.
Right.
My guess.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm not without that ability. I don't have that. I'm not trained.
Some people are, by the way.
I'm not trained to look that way.
Well, I think a lot of us who seem emotionally unintelligent, it's not a lack of ability. I think it's a choice. I think we choose.
Yeah, that too.
Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, because I definitely choose sometimes to not think or consider other people's emotions.
It's like sports for a lot of men, right? Instead of talking about our feelings, we talk about the football game with each other.
Yeah.
So you and I, instead of talking about our feelings, we talk about Derrida.
And
ideas.
Derrida. Yeah.
And
I can always
history.
I can always retreat to Derrida.
And we speculate about the future, and we worry about the future, and we abstract. So that was my father. Yeah. He could not talk about a feeling to save his life. So what we did was we related by talking about Civil War battles.
Oof.
And World War II battles, and some political ideas here and there, and science.
Politics was absolutely barred from discussion in my family. It was, and I think that's because my mom is of one political spectrum and my dad is of the other.
Which one is which?
I think growing up, my dad was conservative, and my mom, I know she voted for Bob Dole. Was that no?
Nice.
Ross Perot. That's who it was. Well, that's who set him off.
That's at least more interesting.
That's what banned it. That's what got politics banned. But I don't remember any of that. I just remember you could buy those big cosmetic ears to put over your head during whenever Ross Perot ran. I remember that as a child. That sticks out to me.
Oh, right, because he had big ears.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was from here, wasn't he?
I have no idea.
Wasn't he from Texas?
I don't remember anything about the guy.
I think so. So where was this? Where were you growing up?
This was here in Houston.
In Houston?
Yeah.
And what were your parents doing besides being Ross Perot fans or not?
My dad is
and being Irish Americans.
My dad works in IT. And so
you come by it honestly, in other words.
Yeah.
The personality type, right?
Oh,
does he have the personality type of IT? Yeah. Isn't it amazing? Pretty uniform among them, isn't it?
So,
but I mean, you and I and people like us are very similar to that, right?
He's very analytic. He is a perfect rational thinker.
Yep.
Approaches things from that perspective. My mom,
was his name Robert by any chance?
No, his name is Jim,
because that was my dad.
And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So my mom is also radical in her own way. She's very antagonistic to power. So that's where I picked up all of my
there you go,
anarchism and trouble with authority. Yeah,
I hate that term, because it's just you're not. Well, maybe you are. Let me ask you this: are you a contrarian? Do you take the opposite position just for the sake of being?
No, but I used to be
different. Okay, yeah,
I used to do that. And actually, depending on who I'm talking to, I will do that.
I wondered that about myself.
There are some people that I engage with that and this is just me being honest, because I don't like them, I'm going to disagree with everything they say.
Right.
And
my mother,
try to engage that more honestly, but sometimes it's really hard to.
Right. No, my mother said, and she was right about this. She said, you're always looking for opposites.
Yeah.
Whatever's in front of you, whatever's said.
I can see that about you.
The immediate, the instinct, the immediate response to me, for me, the reflexive response is to find the opposite.
Yeah.
And
my instinct is to say no. And my wife calls me out on this too a lot. She goes, no, you're just being difficult. You're just saying no because you want to say no, or because I'm telling you what to do. I do not like being told what to do.
Yeah. So you've got an anti-authoritarian streak in you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you got that from your mom, of all people?
Yeah.
Moms don't do that usually.
But if I were going to, so I'll tell you a story. And this was my Mother's Day gift to her over the weekend. She wanted me to tell her my favorite story about her. I was in ROTC in high school.
Whoa.
Also not good for my anti-authoritarian complex. I really liked it my first year. I was very engaged, and I thought I'd go into the military. Both my grandfathers are Air Force pilots. My dad's father is a retired colonel, broke the speed of sound.
Whoa.
He's flown almost every plane. He still flies, and he's over 80.
Jesus.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Air Force pilots. Also highly analytic, because you got to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rational.
And it was the last day of school, and I wanted to dye my hair green. So she helped me. And so we dyed my hair green, and you're not allowed to have green hair. So and I knew that. So I showed up to school, and they immediately picked me out of the crowd and said, you have to go home or wash it out. And I said, oh, well, I'll just go home. And they went, okay. So they take me into the office, and they're going to call my mom. And I go, yeah, okay, call her. And so they start calling, and the ROTC instructor came in just not coincidentally. He came in and he just saw me, and he goes, Sullivan, you know you're not allowed to have green hair. And he wanted to put in his 2 cents on the telephone too. So he's shouting over the secretary about how it's against ROTC code. And my mom just yelled at both of them. Just gave both of them shit. How dare you fucking call me? I was asleep. Why are you bugging me with this shit? Just send him home. And it wasn't that. I asked her about it later, but I liked that if I was going to get in trouble, it was going to be on her terms, not somebody else's terms. My mom was, because my mom didn't want other people disciplining me.
Right.
She didn't want.
She's the sovereign.
She's the sovereign. No other powers are allowed to interfere. She's very clear about that. So I asked her about it over the weekend, and she said, well, I figured that if you're going to do something radical, and my mom, by the way, also has absolutely no education.
Really?
None. She tried college. She barely made it through school.
Is she from Texas too?
She moved. She was Air Force baby, so she was everywhere.
Okay.
She got kicked out of Catholic school for drinking holy water.
I like your mom.
She said, if you're going to do something radical, you should do it 100%, and you should believe in it 100%, so that if you want other people to follow you, you have to believe 100% in what you're doing. And I went, wow, shit, Mom. And before I started to go, that actually has a lot of great content philosophically. And then she started talking over me and telling me about some other stuff she was not interested in.
So you left the ROTC, you gave up on the military career.
Yeah, pretty quick.
Yeah. So here's what I'm thinking. I think I would have been pretty happy in the military. And here's why.
I've been told that all kind of, it was Isaiah Gooley. He said, he goes, yeah, nobody likes the military, especially the people in the military. He goes, you go and everyone's, what did he say? The lost boys. He goes, everyone's a lost boy there. I might have.
Wait, did he say no one likes it? Or
maybe that's me putting his words.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people like it. And I think I would have liked it. Maybe not for, 10 years or something, but I think I would have liked it. Here's why. Because, us Luftmensch, right? Men of the air, men whose heads are in the air. We are our own sovereigns.
Yep.
Right? we seek that, we demand it. I insist on it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you left your mom's sovereignty, you became your own sovereign, right?
Well, my battle for sovereignty was always against her.
Yeah. And if you've read my work on history, you know, the argument is that being sovereign sucks. Being king sucks. Being the president, being the mayor, being head of an organization sucks because it requires tremendous responsibility. So guess what you have to think about all the time if you're the sovereign? You have to think about the future. You have to live in the future, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think in part, that's why I at least constantly worry about the future. And if I had someone like a sergeant, you know, taking care of the future for me.
Yeah. All you had to do was follow orders.
Yeah.
That does sound nice, especially right now.
Doesn't that sound really, really good? I was just thinking about that because I
could really use somebody else going, oh, we have a handle. And my wife does that for the most part. She goes, oh, we'll be fine.
Oh, well, yeah, you found your sovereign.
Yeah, she goes, we'll be fine. Don't worry. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's right. Yeah. It's because this last weekend, you know, Renegade University in New Orleans, there were, shockingly, there were 2 people from Fort Polk, the military base in Louisiana, who came. They drove 4 hours from an army base.
Oh, shit.
Active service, U.S. Army.
Are they allowed to go that far?
To come, I guess. And they came to this place. And I'm like, how, why, who, how could you, what? Right? Because, and not only that, one of them came from, this was a multi-generation military family and hardcore Christian family as well, right? And so what's going on there? But I do think that the structure is really, might be very good for someone like me and maybe for you.
I think the structure balances a lot of people out in ways that they need.
Right. So I was like,
most of the problems in my life have been from lack of some kind of structure. And once I get on, I have a very strict routine that I do now.
Oh yeah. You told me you get up at 5 in the morning.
I get up at 5 in the morning and I exercise for 10 to 15 minutes. I drink coffee. I either read or browse Twitter or just kind of sit around. Sometimes I'll watch an episode of something. And then I'm out of the house by 7. I have all my food packed for the day. If I'm adhering to my diet, I have all my food packed for the day. So I'm set. I don't have to buy lunch. I've already eaten breakfast. I cook breakfast, eat breakfast, clean up breakfast, leave the house by 7, go to work for 10 hours, leave, come home, eat dinner, and then either read or play a game or do something and go to bed. I try and go to bed at 9. I do not like staying up late anymore. I don't have time for it.
Yeah, you sound very responsible.
It sounds
very rational, very of the mind, very Western. Kind of my point here. So because I know you have Adriana, but to be your sovereign, but you're also still the sovereign in a sense, right? You're still.
Well, I do it regardless.
You're still responsible for yourself.
She sleeps in.
Right. You're still responsible for stuff, right? Ultimately. So that forces you to be disciplined. That's why it sucks. So here's where, check this out. So, you know, Foucault, you may have heard me talk about this, has these little references. He doesn't really develop it. But these little references to people who he called lived in the shade, right? And it sounds to me like he's talking about people like slaves and serfs and peasants who lived in a dominance hierarchy and they were the bottom and everything was decided for them and they had no choice, et cetera, over their institutions and the structures of their lives. But Foucault, it seems to me, is arguing in those moments that those people had more freedom in a sense than others because they didn't have responsibility for running things. They weren't the sovereign. They were not allowed to worry about the future.
Right.
You're not allowed to worry or think about the future. The future does not belong to you. We take care of that if you're a slave or a prisoner or in the military, right?
Right.
And he said, the people in the shade tend to be the most transgressive because they are able to, because they don't have the constant pressure, the weight of the future. They're free to think, free to do, free to be.
I feel like that works
in the moment
in Foucault's theory. But I would argue that based on my experience of work and the people that I work with. For example, they are constantly worried about the future.
Mm-hmm.
They're
not in the military though. These are just employees of a jewelry shop, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay, good point.
Yeah. In other words, you're not the owner of the shop, right?
No.
Right. So the owner of the shop,
he actually has a secure future. He's the only one.
Well, okay, but he's also the least likely to think about philosophy in the ways that you do.
Yeah, probably.
To play.
Yes.
So it's about being an adult. That's also what I'm talking about here.
Okay.
So, and I think what Foucault was talking about. So going from the shade, meaning, pre-modern, he's talking about pre-modern societies, pre-modern hierarchies, right? The move from that into modern hierarchies where everybody's basically a sovereign, right? You're a wage laborer now instead of a slave laborer. So you have to go out and make your own living and survive on your own, which means you have to make all these decisions about the future constantly. Right. The future is given to you. The king is now inside of your head. He's no longer controlling you from outside.
Yeah.
Right. So or God is now inside of you instead of outside of you, coercing you. Right. So yeah, I mean, and that's why I argue that slaves culturally were more free than free white Americans who had to worry constantly about their crops producing enough to live on to get through the winter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, forever and ever and ever. The slaves had everything taken care of for them, but they could not think about the future. They weren't allowed to. So I was thinking about these military people today, actually, I was hanging out with. And one of them was 28 years old, and both parents were officers, career officers. So she was literally born into it. She was born on a base and she's been on a base, basically, her entire life. She's 28, right? And I was like, gosh, that's so horrifying when I first hear it with my Berkeley academic lefty ears. But then the more I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, hold on now. All you got to do is follow orders and do what they ask you to do. They'll take care of you forever.
Well, they might.
They definitely will. If you do what you're supposed to do, if you follow orders, right? Follow the rules, they will take care of you forever.
But you also have to be the kind of diligent that...
Unless you die in one of their wars.
Or if you deviate in the slightest, maybe not in the slightest, but if you deviate intellectually or...
Oh, hold on now. So I said if you follow their rules, which is all external and visible, right? They don't know what's in your mind. So when you go back to the barracks at night and lying on your cot or wherever they are in your bed, whatever they sleep on these days, I think, yes, I'm actually convinced of this, that your mind is freer in that moment because there's no point in thinking about the future. It's all determined for you by other people.
I don't want to concede that point.
I know you don't, and I don't either, but it seems almost inescapable. How else do you explain why slaves invented jazz?
I don't have an answer to that question.
The music of freedom.
So let's go back to, let's think about this through a mind-body.
So no, but the fact that you're sorry, one last point about you to close this, and I'll let you talk. You're an employee. Yeah. Not the owner.
Definitely.
And I suspect that has something to do with the fact that you spend a considerable amount of your time reading really fucking hard philosophy books for fun.
Yeah, but I also didn't have the initiative or startup capital to create my own business.
I know. I'm saying if you had and you'd done that, you probably wouldn't be talking to me right now. And you probably wouldn't have said interesting things about Foucault on Twitter to me, et cetera, et cetera. And you wouldn't have your own podcast. And you just wouldn't be thinking about it because you'd be worried too much about making your business work.
Right.
I don't know. Let's just think about it. I just want you to join the military. That's all I'm saying.
I do not.
And I'll be right behind you. Do they take 52-year-olds?
They will not take. I actually, I checked 2 years ago, and I am officially too old to join every branch.
Oh, really?
Yep.
There's a cutoff age?
Yeah. I think the Army might still take me.
There's an age at which you can't.
Yeah, they
no longer enlist.
Yeah, they want you from about 18 to 25, ideally, and then I think the Army is the last one that'll really take.
You know why? Because they knew about me. They knew I was coming eventually.
Yeah.
They closed that off. Okay.
Because they listen to your podcast.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Of course they do. Joint Chiefs of Staff are huge Unregistered fans. So you were about to say something else, though.
So if I were to confront that problem that you presented to me through the mind body, I think you're unintentionally making a mind body dualism.
Uh-oh.
Because you're talking about it, all of my my body is taken care of.
Right.
The army takes care of my body, but they still don't have my mind.
Right.
But those two are, when they dictate everything about your material and physical life, that's going to affect your mental state. That's going to affect how you think about power structures in the world. That's going to affect how you interact with that system. And so if you were to be in the military and start deviating from that intellectual hegemony, I think that would also affect how you behaved. And then they would not like you so much.
No, right. You would have to accept this contradiction, right?
You'd have to live in the contradiction.
What usually happens in situations like this is the guy, and I know plenty of people like this because that's kind of a lot of my fans actually are ex-military who went haywire when they're in the military, and now they're like anti-war activists and whatever, right? So yeah, that's not going to work, right? If you're in the military and you have, free thoughts, et cetera, and then start and dislike that tension, right? Yeah. Dislike the contradiction.
If you're not able, you're also going to have
that's not going to work.
You're going to have a huge burden of wrestling with that contradiction.
But if you were born a slave and it never was presented as any kind of possibility that you would be freed ever, right? Like most slaves, right? That's just like the air you breathe, right?
Yeah.
Then there is no tension. There is no, you have free thoughts and you're going to be a slave the next day and you'll be a slave forever. So there's no rebellion. There's no friction. There's no,
and I know plenty of people that live,
there's no pain.
That live their lives in day to day without any kind of heady, philosophical thought burdening them. And they do just fine.
Yeah.
They're happier than me. Some of them.
Yeah. It's funny. Someone was just asking me about the pain, this discomfort he feels every day working as a public school teacher while being a libertarian opponent of public schooling. And I was like, why
wouldn't the libertarian position be just get a different job?
Sure. But that's not so easy. But like, it's sort of like, well, why not just accept it? No, my point was that he was seeking sovereignty in a sense. In other words, he was taking responsibility for the entire society. He believes that we would all be better off without public schools, et cetera, right? So his sovereign, responsible self, right, is in conflict with his employer-slave body.
Yeah, and it sucks to find yourself in a system that you oppose.
Because, and this is going to sound so reactionary, it'll take people's breath away, but I really mean this. If he would just accept it, his slave status in a sense, right? And not be aspirational and not be ambitious in that way, not take responsibility, not worry, not take on the responsibility for society as a whole, the obligations, he would certainly not feel that unease anymore, that discomfort, that pain. He said he feels every single day walking into that building.
I believe it.
And he might be, I know this is a weird term, but might be happier.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My worry is that kind of stoicism that's common.
Jesus Christ, I'm sounding like Jordan Peterson. Who are you? Did he send you here?
No, that stoicism of that's characterized by Eastern thought of just acceptance. I worry about what that holds for radical movements. Where's the room for revolution and change if all we're doing is accepting our fate as cogs in the wheel?
Yes, exactly.
And that would not be very Derridian,
right?
Which would call for us to expand that circle. We would need to reach for the other, reach for the impossible.
Okay.
And might not make us happy. And that also sucks. And that's one, I guess that's the challenge.
Yeah, that's exactly the thought I had when I first encountered Zen Buddhism was, whoa. Because in fact, the first Zen Buddhist I encountered was Thich Nhat Hanh, he's a Vietnamese monk.
Okay.
He's written a bunch of books, he was like Headspace long before Headspace happened.
Yeah.
Really good stuff. Totally dig him. But like, yeah, it's all about this. It's just like living in the moment, living in the moment, living in the moment, right? And then I'm like, wait, yo, dude, you were a Vietnamese person living in Vietnam in the 1960s. Hello.
Yeah.
So then I don't know what you were saying about this thing called the war and the Americans and invasion and
right. How much of Zen Buddhism
would you have said that? I don't know. That's a good question. I don't even know what the Zen Buddhist monks in Vietnam said before they set themselves on fire. Maybe the setting themselves on fire was their answer to this, in a sense.
Maybe
to accept. I don't know. I mean, it was a protest of the war,
it
but
was definitely symbolic.
Sure,
something.
But like, yes. But I had the question that you had was like, wait, does this mean you wouldn't have opposed the war? Does this mean you wouldn't have done something to oppose? Right. In other words, yeah, that's not living in the moment to oppose a war. That's living in the future. That's trying to change to affect the future. That's taking responsibility also for the society and for the future.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to do with that, except maybe now.
How many Zen Buddhists have children?
None, because they're celibate.
Right. Yeah. That also affects everything.
That's also a real problem.
I would have been very stoic if I didn't have to also worry about my son.
Oh yeah. We'll see. Guess right. Yeah. That makes you the sovereign, right? Because you're now
because now I have concerns that extend not only beyond my concerns, but beyond my fucking life.
Well, you're now the head of state, right?
Yeah.
And he's your subject.
Right.
That's the killer, is having kids.
And teaching them to be...
That's the killer. If you care about them. Yeah. If you care about being a parent, you don't have to.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't, but I do, and apparently you do. And so, man, that's the killer.
I tried teaching him... tried giving him a book, Sophie's World.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read it?
Mm-mm.
It's, I think it's children. I haven't read it either. It's a big book. So I thought he might like it because when I was not his age, he's 8, but I used to like carrying big books that I never read. That's how I got into philosophy was I rented Aristotle from the library because it was a big book and I just kind of carried it around.
Which one? Ethics?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I just carried it around. And probably never opened it. I definitely don't remember. But that inspired me to take a philosophy class once I got into college.
Mm.
Oh, all right. But I tried to get him to read it. And I was like, here, try and read this. And he goes, that's a big book. And I was like, yeah, it's about philosophy. He goes, what's that? I went, it's about all kinds of ideas like what is real and I wasn't able to engage him that way. But there's other TV shows that, what's it called? Gravity Falls. That's it. It's a kid's show. I love it. And I started watching it with my son, Connor, because there's a scene where 2 characters are sitting down on a bench and they're talking about Sartre. And I'm like, did they just quote being and nothingness? So I started watching. It's just a really surreal show, but there might be some philosophical work to be done there. I haven't done it yet, but somebody might have. I wanted to touch on something topical, though, about gatekeeping in philosophy.
Yeah, let's do that.
And so this is about how we get people engaged in philosophy in unusual ways, but also ways that people who study philosophy don't like. Did you see that big stream of Kanye drama?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So before he went on the political rant, when he was just talking about, I'm going to release a philosophy book, my Twitter started blowing up with some of the academics that I follow that were just absolutely against it or condescending towards it. They're gatekeeping. Mm-hmm. And so I engaged with one of them who made a show of muting Kanye. And I said, look.
What a hero.
Yeah, whatever. And I said, look, he does, he studies theology and phenomenology. So he's really interesting to read some of the things that he says, but he's absolutely disengaged from pop culture.
And this is an academic, a professor somewhere?
He's not a professor. He's a PhD candidate.
Okay.
But I engaged. I said, look, we can't gatekeep here. If Kanye's reach is way larger than any living philosopher, probably all of them combined. He has a huge reach. So let's say, do I think Kanye has a whole lot of valuable philosophy to offer? No. Maybe.
I think he has some, actually.
I think we could engage his work charitably. And if he gets 1% of his audience, of his young Black audience into philosophy departments.
It's mostly white, actually, but yeah.
Even that.
But sure, whatever.
But
yeah.
If we just get 1% of them into a philosophy department, then they can engage with other works.
Yeah.
And that benefits everybody. I think everybody should be doing philosophy.
But wait, we've already established that it makes one miserable.
I know, we need to change that.
Let's do it now.
But it matters in how, in what we do with it.
Yeah.
So if we engage philosophy as work, if we engage philosophy as really rigorously and burden people with these ideas, then yeah, you either end up depressed or you end up disengaged. There's all kinds of problems. Philosophers are historically known for being mentally ill in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Fisher, whose book I just finished,
killed himself.
And he talked in Capitalist Realism about the effects of mental health. He was talking about the effects of capital on mental health. But he was talking about his society today, the state of mental health and the conversation about mental health and how it's lost. And all these people are lost with it. But if we're able to engage philosophy more leisurely, then look, everybody learns math. Everybody learns English. Everybody learns science. But not everybody learns philosophy. And you can play math. We have math games. We have hundreds of them. That's how we help teach math. We teach it in fun ways. My son right now is absolutely defeated by math.
Good for him.
He cannot grasp it.
Tell Connor I like him.
He's stuck. He looks at the problem and he goes, oh. And it's the word problems that get him. They always got me too. I was bad at word problems.
God, I just hate all of it, but sure.
But
I was actually a little pissed that they took our words from us and
put them on
used
math.
them against us.
But we teach everybody at a very young age all these different areas, but we're not teaching people how to even think playfully.
So tell me, what grade is Connor in?
He
third?
Is finishing third grade.
Yeah. So tell me how you would teach philosophy to third graders. What would you say to them? What would be the questions you would want them to deal with?
Let me see.
How would you make it fun, engaging, and interesting for an 8-year-old?
I think we'd start with ethics problems.
Yeah, that's easiest.
Children's books teach ethics. So have I hate the trolley problem, but maybe that'd be good for kids.
Wait, which problem?
The trolley.
Which one is? About whether you let somebody
do you pull the lever? Yeah, do you pull the lever and 5 people die, or 1 person dies, or do you let the train go and 5 people are killed?
Right.
But there's all kinds of variations where there's like a fat guy, and do you push the fat guy and save the other 2?
There's a fat guy version of the trolley problem.
Yes. But that would be good for children to get them engaged and think about. It helps them think about, why are their actions good or bad, instead of us just telling them that their actions are good or bad. They don't have great ways of thinking about the consequences of their actions because we're not teaching them to think about why they're doing what they're doing in the first place.
I find it's very difficult to get children out of their cultural assumptions.
Yeah.
Right.
I bet it's hard to get adults out of it.
Well, yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's funny. Actually, the guy who I interviewed earlier today, Shane Lee, was talking about, he was on this show, on this podcast like years ago, and I was listening to it, and they had a caller into the show to ask him questions.
Yeah.
And he's doing like high level, like cultural analysis and stuff, and like making really radical claims similar to like what I do in Renegade History, like way out of the box, totally inappropriate. Like, talking about stuff like sexuality is good, and and sex work is good, and homosexuality
is good.
Homosexuality is good, and all that stuff, right? So
yeah,
and
100% on board.
This sort of, it was female, almost a woman's voice comes on. It's just like, why do you think homosexuality is good? And then Shane would give this long answer, and then she'd be, but why do you think homosexuality is good? And she says, well, I'm 11 years old, so I need you to answer my question now. Why do you think homosexuality is good?
I need it very succinct.
And he did the best job anybody could possibly to
Yeah.
explain why sexual freedom, it wasn't homosexuality, why sexual freedom is a good thing. And she just couldn't do it because she's in this culture, I think. And just, it's like the air you breathe. I don't know. I'm a little pessimistic about this.
And that's understandable.
Kids.
Yeah. But
and adults too.
If we can teach it to adults, we can teach it to children.
Yeah.
I really believe
that's
that.
true. Yeah.
There's no I don't know if there's a magical age where all of a sudden you go, oh, I understand philosophy now. Like I understand the switch or the play. I understand how the game works. We just have to figure out better ways to teach it.
Yeah.
But we're not doing that because we're studying phenomenology of the something boring, and we're teaching it to nobody.
Yeah. You know, I was a philosophy major. That's what I started off doing.
That's good.
I was going to be a philosophy major. I ended up
Why'd you switch to history?
Because I found out that was the best way to win arguments, was to know history. You can always win the argument if you know the history.
Well, that's what's great about postmodern philosophy.
It also makes you really fucking irritating to everyone around you, right?
Yeah.
Because
philosophy does too.
Because I can always pull the card out. You know, oh well, in 1754 this happened, therefore you're wrong, and they're like, oops, okay, because they don't know the history, right?
Right. So they don't know what else happened.
It's really unfair, and I try not to use it, but when you want to crush someone, being a historian is the best way to go. Oh yeah. If you want,
I was always really bad at history in school.
But how you can't? Well, in high school, you mean?
Yeah. It wasn't until it wasn't being taught to me correctly.
I got C's and D's in history in high school consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as soon as I understood it as a story, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Now that I can grasp like a narrative from it, instead of being like, on 1846, guess what happened? Right. Fucking no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know why. I don't know where I got this idea from, but when I started college, I just got this idea that I had to learn Plato and Aristotle and the greats and the classics. And I don't know where that came from, but I did. And I was expecting
that comes from a huge historical culture of us putting them on gigantic
which is
plateaus.
That's an interesting history that still hasn't been written, right? How those particular books and philosophers and ideas have been not just reinscribed in the culture, right? But actually funded by generations after generations after generations.
The Catholics still use Aristotle.
Of establishments, right? So I was saying this to someone else actually recently, like, it's not just, so the claim that they're still around, they're still taught, they're still part of, required reading everywhere, isn't proof that those are good ideas. It's proof that lots and lots of money and resources have been devoted to making sure those particular people have been taught. So by the churches first, right?
Yep.
And then the universities.
Yeah.
All of which are monopolies basically protected by the state. But regardless, like, it's particular institutions over 2 millennia basically have just poured tons of resources into making sure that we read Plato, or at least know that we're supposed to read Plato.
And you'll notice it's a very particular set of philosophers that you read in philosophy. And so one of the projects that a lot of people on the left have been talking about is they call it like decolonizing philosophy, where we start reading.
I dig it.
Women philosophers, early women philosophers. The counterpart to John Stuart Mill. Do you know about her?
Wollstonecraft, maybe?
Yeah, I think that was her name.
I don't know.
Yeah. She was in step the entire way through his career. First as a secret affair, and then later as a wife. Yeah. But you don't learn that until year 3 or 4.
The problem is that the left, generally speaking, in decolonizing usually just recolonizing. So they're just replacing the dead white men with the groovy black and women people.
Yeah, but I think that power change is important.
Yeah, I mean, what I like is the tension. So what I was going to say, right, between the two. So I want to find tension. My mother said I like to find opposites. I like to find opposites in order to create tension.
Yeah.
I live in tension. I seek it, and it's not totally healthy, but
But that's what you do.
That's what I do.
That's what you're good at.
It's just what I need. I don't know. I just seek it. I don't know. Again, I don't know why, but I do. But so when I went to college, I thought that's what college was going to be. I thought it was going to be world famous philosopher arguing against another world famous philosopher who had totally contrary ideas, and we would watch them debate for hours.
Yeah.
And we would study the debate, and after that, then we would decide as students who was right. Of course, that's not at all what happens.
No, my experience was mostly we study one philosopher and then we study the next. And
usually his student.
Usually his student, right? Or someone adjacent, depending on how the class was structured. Right. But sometimes absolutely unconnected. And then our work would be compare and contrast, but you have to do it. And sometimes that was fine. But what it leaves a lot of philosophy students with is this idea that we don't have any idea what's going on because I read 6 papers that all say different things, and we didn't engage those ideas interchangeably. We just read one, and then you drop that one because you have to go on to the next one because you have 6 other classes that you have to take.
Right.
So now that I'm not stuck with homework and I can read ideas at my own pace, I can read 3 texts from Derrida. Yeah. And then I can read Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed or Earthsea. And I can say, where can I fit this? Where does this work? Where doesn't it work? What else can I do with this? Philosophy is everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere, and it needs to be everywhere. We have all the tools to disseminate it to absolutely everybody, and we're just not doing it. Academics haven't done it. There are some really important people that I follow on Twitter that are talking about getting, they go to conferences like the APA, the American Philosophical Association. That's like the big one, right? Mm-hmm. They go there and they demand that everybody have pamphlets for people with hearing disorders or reading comprehension disorders. The disabled should have philosophy too. There's no reason to barricade them outside of it. Mm-hmm. And the more people that have access to interpret the world philosophically, the better our understanding of the world's going to be, because we're going to have that sphere is just going to get bigger.
Not totally convinced of that, but you might be right. So as you were speaking, I was thinking about
what could it hurt?
I told you about intellectuals and how they cause wars.
Yeah, but we're doing that anyway.
Yeah. But as you were speaking, I was thinking about your concern about gatekeepers, right? Yeah. And I shared that concern. I basically share that concern, but I think the metaphor is not quite sufficient. Here's what I think is happening. Because, have you ever been to New York City?
No, okay. Not since I was a child.
Right. So Columbia University, where I went, right, is in New York City. And the campus, I was thinking about the campus. Mm-hmm. It's an urban campus, right? So it's basically one large city block in Upper Manhattan. And as you might imagine, they had to kind of enclose that campus because it's in the middle of Manhattan.
Right.
Kind of had to, but also I think it was very important symbolically, right?
Right.
So there are literally ringing the campus, I don't know, 20 foot or 30 foot high gates, fences. And then there's a gate, there's about 3 or 4 gates, right, that you enter to get into that campus.
Okay? Right. Okay.
And then in the middle of the campus, the main quad, which is the sort of centerpiece of the whole campus architecturally, are 2 giant neoclassical buildings, right, with huge columns.
Right? Architecture is also a symbol of
right.
Power dynamics.
So one is, it's now the administration building, but it used to be the library, and the other across from it directly is the library. Both have these giant columns, and then on top, on the I forget what the name is, but on the front of the top of those buildings facing to the campus, there's a name for that, whatever, are all the names of the great philosophers. just listed. So it's just,
who picked them? Who picked those names?
And historians, all classical. Cicero, Plato, Aristotle, right? And so here's what I think happened. I think that institutions like that, institutions like the church, but certainly these days and for several centuries now, universities basically, it's not just that they have gatekeepers. That's not the problem. They do have gatekeepers for sure.
Right.
And that's the first line of defense, I guess, or that's the first thing that we need to attack. They did something way deeper. They didn't just have gatekeepers. They built the gates. They built libraries inside the gates.
Right.
They, inside the gates, announced to the world that what we do in here is what's important and good.
This is the work. Yeah.
And after all that, and then here's the worst part, and here's the most important part. They convinced the rest of the world of it.
Right.
That inside those gates is what everyone should do. Yet we're
right.
only we won't allow everyone to do it. We'll only allow the best inside these gates.
I guess I'm a generation younger than you. So I'm technically a millennial, which I didn't know until about 3 years ago. I thought that was the generation younger than me. And then someone was like, no, it's you. I was like, oh. I was told, and maybe you were too, my whole life, you have to go to college to not just get a good job, but to your measure of success will depend on you not being a regular working class person. Otherwise, you'd just be flipping burgers. And I've flipped burgers for a living.
Literally?
It was, yeah. It was fine. It was at a Carl's Jr.
Nice.
It was flip. I didn't do it for long. I wasn't built for the food industry. So I left that. But the way that we, what's the word? We build these hierarchies of what success means, and then we impose those on people, and that makes people unhappy when you end up, because I was supposed to be, here's the thing, I was supposed to be successful. I had the good education.
Yep.
I went to the university.
You had the IQ.
I had the IQ. And now I work at a wage job. I am a wage slave.
Yep.
And so I must have failed.
You're a failure.
I must have failed.
Right.
I'm a failure.
And that caused pain inside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must have.
So where is the problem? The problem is in you. The problem is that you were convinced by them, or you allowed yourself to be convinced by them, that what's inside the gates is what's good and right.
Yeah.
That's my point here, right? It's not them. Fuck the gatekeepers. Fuck the builders of the gates. It's us. The problem is us. And the good news is, look what we're doing right now. We're talking about philosophy.
Yeah, the good news is fuck them, because I can do whatever I want.
In public. Yeah. So we're just doing this. We're not. So I used to be all about killing the gatekeepers and letting people in the gates. And then I realized, whoa, wait a second. I'm not even sure what's inside the gates is good.
Well, everything inside the gates is accessible. I don't have to go to. I don't have to go to. You can search almost any philosopher. .pdf. And you'll get
everything inside the gates is accessible. And on top of that, we're just building our own stuff outside the gates. Well, this is the decolonization thing at its best, right? It's like just adding, and this is also your Derrida ever expanding ocean.
That's right.
The discourse, the knowledge, everything, right? Expanding outward constantly.
Get everything out.
And that's what we've been doing for the last 20 or so years, thanks to technology, et cetera, right? So gatekeepers, I say, let them keep those gates, because guess what, fuckers? The people are losing interest in what's inside there. And you're going to be very sad figures in a few years, standing in front of your gate, keeping the masses from coming in, because the masses won't care anymore and they're going to be doing their own thing. They won't want inside your gate. You'll be all alone pretty soon. And I think that's actually the future.
I think they want that. I think they want to be alone.
Fine. Let them stand all by themselves in front of those giant columns, feeling inferior to Aristotle.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Right. And we'll be having fun with philosophy outside the gates.
That's right.
And then they'll see that they really have lost and we are the winners.
Yeah.
I'm serious. That's what's going to happen. That's what is happening right now.
All right. I believe it.
Yeah. So don't worry about them. Just do your thing, man.
I'm not worried about them.
Oh, okay.
I used to be worried about them.
Okay, good. So, do you want to do this? Like as a vocation,
No,
thing?
no, I absolutely don't want to make this my job.
Do you want to continue making or fixing jewelry?
No, also no. I don't want to work.
Okay.
I would really like to not work. I'm trying to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah. How to not work?
Yeah, how to not work, or how not to feel like I'm working.
How does Ariana feel about that?
She wants to also not work, so
Right.
one of us is going to have to.
Mm-hmm.
But last year I set out to work less and make more money, and I managed to pull it off.
Wow.
This year, I think my boss caught on, and I have yet to be successful at working less and making more money.
Right.
But I don't want to make my podcast my job, because then it will stop being play.
Yeah, I've already explained to you what will happen.
Yeah, I know exactly what that looks like once that becomes my focus.
Well, let me say, okay, look, I love this. I love doing my podcast, and there is still play in it for sure, but it is also not, there's also work and stress and responsibility and
right.
And gatekeeping, actually.
Yeah.
You know, I kept that philosophy professor out, and I let you in. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But you do want to do philosophy, though.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
But I can do that anywhere.
Right.
That's my focus.
Yeah.
Is where else can I do philosophy? Can I do philosophy in my workplace? And absolutely.
Ooh, nice. Yeah.
I can look at the working in the jewelry business gives me access to a lot of Marxism by happen chance, because I happen to be a worker, and in the repair shop, and one of my supervisor, who also not educated, said to me, you know, I feel like some of my labor, I'm not being paid for a lot of the work that we do that the boss seems to profit from a lot. And I go, you know, there's another guy that thought a lot about this. Have you ever heard of Karl Marx? And she goes, huh? And I go, nah, never mind. And I ignored it. But I get to think about marriage. I get to think about love. I get to think about capitalism. I get to think about
at your work.
At my work.
This is what I'm saying, man. You're freer there because you're not the boss.
I get to think about the way that we work with our hands and form art. Yeah. I get to think about how automation is killing artists. I get to think about how automation, the limitations of automation. Yep. So right now, we can 3D print a wax that is castable, and but we can't 3D print metal. But once we do,
oh my God,
that will eliminate. So right now we can eliminate the wax carver, that's sculptor. These are sculptors. That's what they do. They make tiny little sculptures. And we fired one of ours. He was like 70. We didn't need him anymore. We had the 3D printer. It was cheaper. So once we can 3D print metal, we're not going to need the caster. And if somebody ever invents the tools to set stones, then we're not going to need the stone setter. Now you're still going to, that's a very dexterous job. I don't think that's going to be easy. But I don't think that's outside the limitations of technology. So how much automation will we let take over? And more importantly, what do we do in a capitalist society when automation takes jobs from workers?
Yeah.
What do we do with people then? Because we can't just infinitely create more innovative jobs to replace. I think our population is growing too big. We're going to have not a worker shortage. We're going to have a surplus, and we're not going to have the work for them to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you can't ever get a trade worker to be you could get him to be an engineer, but you got to send him to the university. You got to train him. What are we going to have a society of 7 million doctors? Or
So I told you I try not to pull history cards on people too often.
Please do.
Can I just
Go
pull
ahead.
one on you?
Go ahead. Solve this problem for me.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is debated a lot these days, right? Oh my God, we'll have robots will do all the work.
I'd be fine if robots did all the work.
Yeah, well, except you want to get paid too, right?
No, I don't care about. I want to live in a post-capitalist society under those conditions.
Right. I mean, so basically, this is not new. This is all that's going to happen. All that is happening is what's been happening for 200 or so years, which is that we keep introducing technologies for various reasons, labor saving or labor killing in the best way technologies. Right. We've been doing that since the 1800s, and consequently, if you look at graphs of hours worked, it's just gone pretty much straight down in all the advanced industrialized societies because of that. And no one denies, despite blah, 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 inequality, this and that, we all live materially better and better and better over the last 200 years. So I'm not scared. We're gonna, I mean, that's the historical trend, and it's a 200-year trend, right? Less work and more material wealth. The poor now live way, way better materially than they did 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago.
Right.
It's very linear, as a matter of fact, right? I'm not saying that history always gets better, but in this way, materially, there's no doubt we've gotten better off, including the poor, especially the poor. In fact, the poor have had the best improvements in their lives materially, and work less because of technology. So just embrace it, bring it on.
What am I going to do when my job gets replaced?
You're fucked. Just kidding. No, of course. Right. So there are what are called local or individual or isolated crises, because yes, this particular industry or this particular craft, in your case, becomes obsolete, obviously. And so those particular people in those occupations or spheres of the economy certainly suffer in that moment. But then what should we do about that? There's no question that as a society and for humanity generally, it's been a net positive, including most often for even those people, because usually they just move to some other occupation or some other craft, which usually historically pays better and has less work, in fact. So like most of the coal miners in West Virginia in the 1920s didn't just die, most of them just did something else eventually. So it'll be fine.
All right, I'll believe you.
This is what Adriana says. I'm doing her job right now.
Okay.
But I'll be really interested to see what you do.
I got options. I'm not worried.
Yeah?
I'm smart and I'm young.
I was going to say, so philosophy does certainly do good things for you. It's useful in your own life day to day, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, tell us how.
So I think of philosophy as a way of approaching problems.
Yeah.
And so the kinds of shit that I put on my resume is like, I'm uniquely trained for critical thinking. I'm uniquely trained for problem solving. I'm uniquely trained in reading comprehension and extrapolating ideas. I'm uniquely trained in, it's the only kind of degree I think that does this specifically as a discipline. I used to tell people that if you study philosophy, there's two ways to do it in the academics. You study the history of philosophy, which is fine, but kind of boring. And then you study the practice of philosophy as an act. Philosophy is a verb. Philosophy is something that you do. So it's the way that you interpret the world. It's the way that I'm able to, it definitely helps in stress management, because I'm able to mitigate different problems. If I go, oh, well, I can actually just not worry about, I don't have a particular example, but.
It's like an orientation to the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the only kinds of things that I do that are like uniquely philosophical, or I'll try and play with I'll try and make like a weird category of like a philosophical school, but I'll invent it myself. Like I'm a Derridian anarchist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any other.
Well, I am, in fact, a Derridian anarchist.
Yeah. Well, now I know one more.
Now there's two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's great.
Yeah.
And so that's what I focus on, is trying to interpret the world, but also envision a better one, so that I don't have to worry about the one that I'm in right now.
Yeah. Derrida is your boy, and who's another favorite?
I do like Mark Fisher. I just finished his book. I found his work really engaging. And here's why. So in capitalist realism, he confronts what capitalist realism he defines as the ideology that says there is no alternative to capitalism.
Real quick, sorry, so people know. So this is actually a book published by Zero Books. Doug Lane, former guest of mine on this show. Yep.
Yeah. Capitalist realism is the ideology that says there's no alternative to capitalism.
Right.
No viable alternative.
This is Fisher saying this.
This is Fisher saying this.
So it is sort of okay. It's fatalistic in a way. In that way,
Zizek says it's either Zizek or Frederick Jameson.
Mm-hmm.
We're unsure of the origin, but it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism.
So right there, I don't understand. Why is that? Why is this necessary and inevitable that we will always live under capitalism?
I don't know.
Oh.
I don't agree. I don't agree.
It's just an assertion on his part?
No, he's not saying that that's a good thing. He's saying that's what the people that are capitalist realists believe.
Oh, okay.
That's their ideology.
Okay.
And so one of the really interesting things he starts off with early in the book is talking about how capitalist societies, if we're talking about ourselves in this historical moment, we exist in a capitalist society.
Mm-hmm.
The way that our society is able to absorb revolution and then repackage it and sell it right back to you. The way that you buy anarchy stickers.
Which has been called co-optation in the past, right?
Yeah. He calls it, I don't remember the word, but something similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The way that it takes everything that you throw against it, all the anti-capitalism, it will absolutely absorb. It loves it. It feeds on it because it subjugates anti-capitalists. It subjugates socialists. And socialists get stuck in trying to recreate historical revolutions. Marxists get stuck trying to recreate Marxist revolutions.
They do live in the past a lot, don't they?
Right. And so Mark Fisher says, how do we imagine ourselves out of this problem? We need to find a way to reactivate our imagination, to imagine not only an alternative to capitalism, but one that maybe isn't socialism and maybe isn't Marxism.
Oh,
maybe one that doesn't hinge on those ideologies either. Maybe something entirely different, but we don't even know I don't even know where to start, what that would look like.
Yeah.
But so I integrate Derrida into this because imagining something outside of our conception is everything that Derrida focused on, was imagining the impossible.
Right.
So Mark Fisher was set on imagining something new, and he was a cultural critic. We have to imagine something else in a culture that takes our really imaginative anti-capitalist media, movies, music, everything, and it sells it back to us cynically. And so we have nothing but cynicism left.
Like Fight Club, I'm thinking of. Right?
Yeah, Fight Club.
Good example.
Wall-E.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of them. Mm-hmm. Nirvana. He talked about Nirvana.
The band?
Yeah. Uh-huh. All of punk rock music.
Right.
Rage Against the Machine. Uh-huh. All of it. They all become capitalists.
Right.
And
or commodities.
Right. It commodifies you.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that we can approach with is cynicism and this new irony culture that dominates humor now is and I'm a huge victim of this. is I use ironic detachment as a defense mechanism from engaging sincerely in the world. And that's a kind of not being in the present. It's a way. It's absolutely just a defense mechanism of saying, I'm anti-capitalist, but I participate in an anti-capitalist system. Well, capitalism fucking loves that, man.
Yeah.
Because you still spend all your fucking money.
Yeah. Yeah. Not living in the moment, making philosophy fun, making it relevant, changing the world. I think what it comes down to is, we were talking about the mind-body duality. I think that has to be dissolved. And I think the way to do it, the way to do all of this that you're talking about, is to connect the ideas, the visions, to the present and to the body and to ourselves and to our feelings, most importantly, what's inside of us. Does that make sense? In other words, to stop abstracting.
Yeah.
Or abstract less, or at least, sorry, no, not abstraction can be fine, but to not draw that hard line, right, between mind and body and abstraction and the physical and the concrete.
But also not drawing that hard line between the future and the now.
And that too. Binaries. The West loves binaries.
Yeah.
And that sucks. And
well, that was the entire history of modern thought, was making all kinds of binaries. All they wanted to do, they had to draw hard lines. They had to make distinct categories. And the entire history of postmodern thought has been looking at the actual history of these ideas and showing not only that those lines maybe don't exist, but that I always imagine the lines of modernity drawn in sand. And so you can see them and they're distinct and they make sense. But as you get closer, you see that it's the same sand. And over time, the sand just blurs and it fills itself back up. The line is blurry all the time. All the lines are blurry. That's one of the things about Deleuze that I'm trying to get a grasp on, was he talks about rhizomes, that everything is interconnected. He has a bunch of really interesting metaphors for the world.
Yeah. This was the tweet that led me to you, right? You said this thing about modernism, right, has been drawing hard lines between men and women, black and white, mind and body, right?
Yeah.
And postmodernism is, I forget how you put it, but an attempt to...
Postmodernism is the dissolution of those lines.
Yes, exactly.
Just either breaking them up or showing how fluid those lines are.
Because the postmodernists saw the lines as being drawn in sand, not in stone.
That's right.
Boom. There you go. Boom. Well, so thanks for doing this.
Thank you, man. This has been great. I love this. I could do this all day.
Cool. Me too. Yeah, no, I think it can be fun, making this into your profession. I'm not saying you should, but I do think you should do something, keep doing it. And I think you should maybe continue your podcast, maybe think about doing videos, but you do have a talent for making these difficult ideas accessible and fun. And what you said, leisurely. I like that. Yeah, man. And I really do appreciate this.
Let me tell your listeners what's on my agenda for the next couple episodes. So right now I'm looking at, I'm doing a lot of work with fiction because I'm listening to a lot of Audible books. So I'm going to finish the Earthsea books. I got 3 left. I haven't figured out how I'm going to group them. The next one's going to be about death.
Ooh.
The whole 3rd book is about death. And I might integrate Heidegger's being towards death. I might not, because Heidegger's complicated ethically to engage with. After I finish the Earthsea, I want to look at The Dispossessed, which is another book by Le Guin, and talk about imaginative anarchy societies and what a not dystopian, but also not utopian anarchy society would look like.
There's a line that's being dissolved between utopia and dystopia, right?
The Dispossessed is a very good book that paints a reasonable anarchy.
Cool. James and the Giant Podcast. Check it out. Thanks, man.
Thank you. This has been great.
This was the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To support the show and become a member of the Unregistered community, go to unregisteredlisteners.com. To purchase any of the Renegade University video courses, go to thaddeusrussell.com/courses.